Hello guys and welcome back. 10 years ago, Gearbox revealed the first details of Borderlands 1-2 Game Informer. To celebrate this, Game Informer re-released their entire cover story and art back from 2007. In this video, I will be breaking down the best details that never made it into the final release of the game from this article. As always, if you want to check out the full article for yourself, links will be in the description down below. So with that, let's get right into it. So first, we have to talk about what we learned about weapons. We know one of the main selling points of the Borderlands franchise is 500,000 guns. So obviously there was mention of guns in this article, but there's one quote that stuck out to me the most, which read, quote, "They've seen rifles shoot everything from homing darts to rockets. One of the guns tracks onto something and locks. After 3 seconds, the target suddenly explodes." End quote. Okay, so I know they talk about darts, but homing darts, guys. We learned in this article that darts would have played a role even in the story. We learned a little bit later that Mordecai shoots a tracking dart on a lone rack so we can trace it back to the rack hive and kill it. But homing darts would have been amazing, especially if they could have done physics where maybe they lob a little bit more and don't travel as far as normal bullets, or it just would have been really cool to see what they would have done with this. In Borderlands, we still end up seeing a version of the tracking on weapons via vehicles in the game. We're able to lock onto enemies as long as another player isn't in the turret seat, and then we can shoot them automatically. And even the idea of tracking on, locking, and then firing homing darts or rockets, it's expanded even further in the General Knox expansion, where the quote monster vehicle fires a single projectile that then releases 3 homing missiles per shot. So at least we got a version of it. Second, we learn about character accessories, which have become a staple in the Borderlands franchise, which include grenades, shields, and storage deck upgrades, and they were all available in Borderlands 1. Gearbox expands on this further and drops some interesting information. Quote, "Additionally, you'll need shields, energy generators, storage decks, and glove microchips that allow you to program grenades to do many strange things, like track vehicles, steal health, rain down fiery death from above." End quote. Now, what we should take out of this is that grenades could be used to track vehicles. Now, obviously, this would not have been a strong combat item, but could have played a major part in the story. The same way the players would track a rack hive and a rack, maybe the player was also set to follow vehicles at some point in the story, to maybe then follow them back to a secret hideout or loot, or so many possibilities. It's actually endless, and definitely could have added an extra dynamic to the story missions. Third, the article goes on to talk about characters and how customization would have worked. Just as a recap, the extent of customization character-wise in Borderlands 1 was limited to changing colors of the clothing, which was fine for the time, but the article shows at one point Gearbox had more ambitious plans. So, quote, "Even if there are some repeated characters in your party," which is referring to how there can be multiple Rolands, multiple Liliths, multiple Mordecais, and so forth, "everyone will be wearing different armor and helmets anyway, so it's not like you'll have to worry much about the clone trooper effect." End quote. So obviously Gearbox had to tone this down and definitely didn't want to bite off more than they could chew in the terms of Borderlands 1. But it would have been nice to have different armor and helmets with potentially different stats to differentiate the players from each other's of the same class. This ended up making its way to Borderlands 2 in the pre-sequel, where it's become now a staple of the series. But not having it in Borderlands 1 really isn't a feature that takes away from the game. Now players, they want to play as the character, they like the personalities and small dialogues, so we don't really care too much about being able to customize them exactly, and Gearbox has done a great job with the skins that we have gotten. Fourth, we learn about AI, which is artificial intelligence. Yes, and you heard me right, I'm not talking about NPCs, which are non-playable characters. The Borderlands series is littered with NPCs everywhere that give out missions, provide a few lines of dialogue, or even enemies and bosses. But the game really isn't too focused on having AI, and the article shows the developer's original plan. Quote, "Even if you don't have any friends, you don't necessarily have to go at it alone. AI allies will crop up from time to time to give you a hand if you'd like. Depending on the missions ahead, players can select from among a medic, sniper, or gunner for support. In addition to the other two main characters, squad commands are simple. Stay close, stay far, stay here. Allies will have to wait for you to shoot first before they attack, or they will return fire if shot at. So you shouldn't have to worry about them broadcasting your position. You can also equip them with weapons and gear and decide how they'll level up. And we're building this game from the start as a co-op game that you can play by yourself. End quote. This did not make it into the game, but if you guys know anything about Borderlands 1, they wanted to make a Diablo game with guns. And the whole thing in Diablo, if you don't have friends to play with, you're given just a blank slate AI that you can give gear to. You can kind of choose their skills, very limited, but they're there to help and kind of provide support. Not as much as a normal player would, but it does help with solo. Now, it did make it into the game, and my personal belief is that developing character AI to work along with the player was just too difficult and too broad for the scope of the game. Gearbox has expressed multiple times, even in Borderlands 2, the process of having Brick help the player escape through Thousand Cuts when Hyperion begins to attack was a long process for them and one of the hardest things to add into the game. So we know that Gearbox doesn't think the payoff is usually worth the work, which I'm fine with. And I think a lot of solo players are as well. I'm a majority of solo players, so I don't really care too much if I don't get an AI to work along with me. But there actually was another piece of information regarding AI, so I guess we'll call this Hidden Detail 4.5. So it says, quote, unlike most FPS, you're not shoehorned into being the driver all the time. Gearbox is putting a special focus on properly functioning driver AI. The AI actually understands the terrain that it's driving on as well as what type of things equal cool, says Hurley. We witnessed the AI in action in the wide open desert area with plenty of bumps and hills. Mordecai provided a steady ride for aiming purposes, found some nice jumps, and managed to steer clear of any walls or head-on collisions with other vehicles, end quote. So I can't believe that Gearbox had a working AI that could drive the player around. That the AI could also, quote, provide a steady ride for aiming purposes. Like, my friends can't even provide a steady ride in Borderlands 2. Driving is hard. And this just kind of leaves me speechless. I don't even have enough time to talk about the whole driving system in Borderlands, but I'd like to see what that kind of looked like and how they got that working and then decided to cut it if they were really as far as what they say they were. But we'll move on. Now, on to the fifth and final hidden detail. This also relates to cars, but parallel to a lot of the other details, Gearbox had a much broader view for the game than what was possible. Whether the reason is fiscal or developmental wise is unknown, but the time and resources were never used to complete it for the final project. The article reads, quote, early on, players will most likely have to rely on stealing bandit buggies, but eventually receive higher end models worth hanging on to. So there's more information, but I have to stop there. The idea of players holding up bandits till they get out of their car and then you have to fight them to get their car is amazing. Can you imagine Borderlands 1, Mad Mel, who's one of the few vehicle bosses in Borderlands, if we defeated him, then we're able to drive his car away? How powerful the player would feel after that? But I digress. We'll move on to finish the quote. So obviously this quote, it's not a whole, not worth another detail, but we'll call it Hidden Detail 5.5. They can select the paint job or wheel type and once again choose from tens of thousands of turrets. We saw the basic rocket in action, and while it can take out buggies with one well-placed shot, rocket launchers take some practice to hit speeding rivals with. If you do connect, however, shards of metal and ragdoll bodies go flying in a blast of smoke and fire. Perhaps the most impressive display of errant tires that will continue to bounce and roll until they hit particularly sizable bump or get run over, end quote. More customization regarding cars is a feature that Gearbox has actually still yet to implement in the series, which is surprising. But I'd love to choose maybe different types of tires like speed tires, control tires, rough terrain, all of which have their purpose and use, or being able to change the turret on the top of the cars. When they say that they'd quote tens of thousands, which almost leads me to believe that they had some sort of modified weapon customization system for the turrets. The same way that Gearbox claims 500,000 guns, but it's just weapons spawning with different parts and different effects. I believe that turrets would have acted the same way, which is how they can claim tens of thousands. just on a smaller scale, or maybe even they wanted the player to kind of craft their turret for the car to add extra customization, but we really don't know, but that's actually really interesting. Those are 5 hidden details that you missed from Game Informer's 2007 Borderlands article. I have another video coming out of this article, so subscribe to see that. I also broke down the original story for this Borderlands and got a lot of unused dialogue in there too and pieced it together, so you guys can go watch that. Let me know all your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for watching and watching me break down 10-year-old news. Thank you guys so much, and see you guys in the next one.